Hello Year 9 and 10, welcome to the second exposure lesson. If you haven't finished the first one yet, I suggest you turn this video off now and go and do it. Today you'll be beginning with matching the devices to their definitions. Pause the video now and give that a go. For those of you who'd like to push yourselves, I suggest you do the STAR challenge, so you need to write your own examples of each device. Check your answers. Here, a metaphor is saying something is something else. Often, these two objects usually have a quality in common. For instance, the candy floss clouds is a metaphor. The implication there is that the clouds are fluffy and pink and light. Personification is giving an inanimate object human qualities. For instance, the leaves danced in the wind. Obviously, we know leaves can't dance, but it gives us the impression that they're moving in the wind. Finally, juxtaposition is two contrasting or opposite ideas in the same text. These could be anything. They could be characters, for instance, a goodie and a baddie. They could be the weather, so sunshine versus the storm. Or it could just be emotions, for instance, anger versus happiness. Today you will be revising the second half of Exposure by Wilfred Owen, so you'll be looking at the final 4 stanzas. Just like with last lesson, it's because this is a really good poem to study in terms of it encompassing many themes in the power and conflict cluster. And just like with the last lesson, you will be answering comprehension questions on each stanza and then writing an essay. Once again, with vocabulary ping pong, you will be expected to write out the words you do not know and their definitions. The first word is stealth, and this means acting in a sneaky way. The second word is snow-dazed, and this is when someone is dazzled and confused by the snow. Glozed is a very old-fashioned word for glaze. Puckering means shrivelling. Select one of these new words and explode them in your mind map. Pause the video now. Stanza 5. Pale flakes with lingering stealth come feeling for our faces. We cringe in holes, back on forgotten dreams, and stare, snow-dazed, deep into grassier ditches. So we drowse, sun-dozed, littered with blossoms, trickling where the blackbird fusses. Is it that we are dying? Pause the video now and attempt the questions below. As ever, I'm going to give you my interpretation of these questions. Your interpretations may be different, and that's a good thing. It's really useful for you to be able to squeeze as much meaning out of a quotation as possible. So if you use my interpretation and then layer it with yours and maybe even provide a third interpretation, that's what's going to give you those higher grades. Number 1. The two devices are personification and alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of the F sound. Some of you may have got imagery, and that's valid too. Imagery is a good one to remember if you get confused by other devices, as most quotations tend to have imagery within it. However, the other devices are more likely to help you to get a better grade. Number 2. As ever with this poem, the use of personification makes nature seem calculated and evil and cruel. It's as if it deliberately wants to attack the soldiers. There's something very personal and eerie about the snow deliberately going to the soldiers' faces. As for the alliteration, The repetition of the F sound is actually a very soft sound, so it could reflect just the pace of the snow falling as it tends to be gentle. However, this is in great contrast or juxtaposition to the deadly effects of the snow. Number 3. Cringe is a very effective verb because it gives the impression of the soldiers recoiling and cowering away from the snow. It denotes a sense of fear, which is in stark contrast to the images that people at home had of the soldiers. There's obviously nothing wrong with being afraid that you might die of hypothermia. It's just not the prevailing image that the propaganda like to portray of the soldiers. Number 4. The soldiers would have been very sleep deprived, so the words snow-dazed and sun-dozed, along with drowse on line 23, would add to their sense of confusion from their sleeplessness. Additionally, there is a phase of hypothermia where people start to hallucinate by remembering warmer times and thinking that they're warmer than they actually are, so this could be alluding to that. Number 5. The blossoms and the blackbird could once again signify this warmth because it makes an allusion to spring, so perhaps the soldiers are hallucinating and thinking of nicer times. To stay on that analogy for a minute, spring also signifies new hope and new beginnings, so perhaps this is also part of the soldiers' hallucinations or their dreams. The rhetorical question shows a sign of desperation. They may become aware of these hallucinations and fear the worst, or they could be seeing the issues that are arising amongst their comrades. So again, you've got that collective pronoun we. They're all in it together, yet they're all really suffering. Stanza 6. Slowly our ghosts drag home, glimpsing the sunk fires glozed with crusted dark red jewels. Crickets jingle there. For hours the innocent mice rejoice. The house is theirs. Shutters and doors all closed. On us the doors are closed. We turn back to our dying. Pause the video now and do the questions below. Number 7. The metaphor in the first line of this stanza is ghosts. This is effective because it conjures up images of the soldiers being a shell of their former selves. Additionally, it is a bit of foreshadowing, as in a glimpse into the future, as many of them would have died on the battlefield. Finally, you could discuss this as foreshadowing Wilfred Owen's own death, as he died in action. Number 8. Sunk fires could link back to that delusional state that soldiers got into just before they died of hypothermia, where once again they're thinking about feelings of warmth and their memories of nicer times. Number 9. The dark red jewels are significant because they are a metaphor for the embers of fire. Again, you can link fire to them hallucinating. However, the colour red is really significant here because you can link that to blood, as in the bloodshed in warfare, but also to danger. Number 10. The line repeats the word closed. One of the reasons authors repeat words is to show their importance, or in other words, to emphasize them. The word closed is symbolic in many ways. The soldiers are literally sleeping in ditches in fields. They may see the odd farmhouse or home, which they are unable to go inside and to get some warmth. Hence home comforts are closed to them. Another interpretation is that the doors are closed to them at their actual homes, so they may want to go back to see their families, but they can't because of a sense of duty or for fear of being labelled a coward. Maybe they see life's opportunities as being closed to them, or perhaps the closed door represents their own death. Finally, I'd like to make a structural point on this stanza. We have many breaks in our lines in the form of colons and a semicolon. We call this caesura. Authors have numerous reasons for using this. Within exposure, we could see it as a reflection of the soldier's state of mind. Their minds are racing, fueled by the anxiety of their situation. So the breaks could represent the jumping from thought to thought in a state of worry. The readers would find these breaks unnerving, as it doesn't follow nicely in the poem. This helps to create that tense atmosphere for us. Stanza 7. Since we believe not otherwise can kind fires burn, now ever suns smile, true on child, or field, or fruit. For God's invincible spring our love is made afraid, therefore not loath. We lie out here, therefore were born, for love of God seems dying. Pause the video now and answer the questions. Number 11. The sun is personified as smiling, making it seem comforting and welcoming. The soldiers are craving the comfort of the sun. It represents much happier days. Number 12. Their faith in God has become shaken. Line 33 shows that their love of God has become fearful. Some of them will no longer believe God has an ultimate plan for their lives. Number 13. Being born juxtaposes, or is opposite to, death. The interpretation could be that God does in fact have a plan for their lives, for them to sacrifice themselves for the good of their country. Number 14. The final line circles back to their loss of faith. God's love for the soldiers seems to have died. They feel everyone, even God, has forgotten them. Stanza 8. Tonight his frost will fasten on this mud and us, shrivelling many hands and puckering foreheads crisp. The burying party, picks and shovels in their shaking grasp, pause over half-known faces. All their eyes are ice, but nothing happens. Pause the video now and answer the questions below. Number 15. As the pronoun his has been capitalized, we can assume Owen is referring to God. Therefore, it could be read as it is God's intention to freeze the soldiers. Another interpretation is that this is Jack Frost, or the personification of Frost. Jack Frost's character was first created prior to this time, therefore it would be appropriate to make that link. Number 16. The verbs shrivelling and puckering in line 37 are very effective. They show the treacherous effects of the frost. Soldiers' bodies are shrivelling up from the effects of the cold, and their foreheads are wrinkling and frowning in pain. This reminds us of the first line of the poem, "Our brains ache." It reinforces physical agony from the weather to go alongside the usual pains we associate with war. Number 17. The sad fact is the burying party are fellow soldiers, so they are helping to bury their comrades. Number 18. Half-known faces could refer to the fact that many soldiers didn't allow themselves to create true bonds with each other because many of their comrades died and it was simply too painful. Also, half-known could refer to the soldiers becoming disfigured and unrecognizable in their death. Number 19. As with the last stanza, the pause in the poem, this time with the use of a full stop, is called caesura. This literally makes the reader pause after the line "pause over half-known faces." So as well as mimicking the action of the soldiers, it could be a mark of respect for the dead. The device is a metaphor. Their eyes being described as ice could refer to the dead soldiers not not having any trace of life left within them. Their eyes can no longer see. They've gone. This could be a literal interpretation too, as the dead bodies would have frozen in the winter months. Finally, you could interpret this as the burying party's eyes. They are so used to death that they have become numb. Number 21. Finally, the last line. We've already discussed in the first lesson the importance of this line. Listen back to the answer to question 14 in Exposure Part 1 if you need a refresher. It is very significant that the poem ends in this way. By having it repeated throughout the poem, it gives a sense of unfinished business. The use of the present tense adds to this idea. Despite the terrifying bullets flying overhead and their fellow soldiers dying, still nothing has changed. The soldiers are still stuck in their trenches, waiting for another battle or waiting for the war to end. The repetition, or refrain, makes the structure of the poem cyclical, which represents the continuation of time in the trenches. But nothing happens is also a criticism of the generals who did nothing to prevent their death. Your essay question today is, how does Wilfred Owen illustrate the power of nature in Exposure? Just like in the last lesson, if you are able to compare it to another poem within the power and conflict cluster, then that would be ideal, as it is what you would be expected to do in your exam. If not, don't worry, just write about Exposure in depth. As with the last lesson, you have these sentence starters, but please feel free to use others. Make sure your point, so your first sentence, links to your quotation and the exploration you're going to make. Don't just repeat the same point 4 times. You're trying to formulate a strong argument, so you can't just say the same thing over and over again. Also, if you can embed your quotation, that will get you a higher grade. Likewise, the more you can say about your quote in your exploration, the better your essay will be. Really try to squeeze out all the meaning of a quotation. It is better for you to write about 4 quotations in real depth rather than saying one thing each about a long list of quotes. With your exploration or your zoom in, discuss the effects of a device, and if a quote has numerous devices, write about all of them. Not all texts have lovely devices which you can write about, but poetry is littered with it. I'd go as far as to say, do not pick a quotation if you cannot spot a device within it. Using that technical language will help you to get those higher grades. Also, if in one of your quotations you are able to make a structural point, that will also help you to get a higher grade. Finally, your zoom out could be historical information or Owen's purpose. Make sure you send your essay to your English teacher for feedback. Pause the video now. The review exercise in this PowerPoint is really important. I would like you to start thinking about creating flashcards for your GCSE exams. If you begin now and just do this little and often, you will have a whole stack of very useful flashcards for you when the time comes. So today, I would like you to select between 2 and 4 quotations from Exposure. The likelihood is these are going to be quotes that you've already written about. I want you to create flashcards for these. So you could include, for instance, the devices and their effects, the writer's purpose, the many meanings of the quote, so all of its interpretations, and important words and their effects. Another way students do quotation flashcards is by actually getting rid of some words and putting it on the back of the flashcard so that you can test yourself and see if you can remember the quotation in its entirety. Because remember, you will only have one poem in your exam, and the other poem you have to compare it to, you need to do it from memory. So it's good to start revising these quotes now. Well done for getting this far, Year 9 and 10. I hope this has been useful for you. Look after yourselves.